Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Joe Szymanski. He's Palmer Johnson. This is the Onward to Victory podcast from Giant Killer, your one-stop shop for all things George Mason basketball. It has been a cold and snowy weekend across the Mid-Atlantic and northern part of the United States. But Palmer, we still have two basketball games to talk about and two upcoming basketball games to preview, including what will be our first ever guest on the Onward to Victory podcast. We'll hear from him shortly. But for now, Palmer, let's get right into it. The Patriots do fall for the first time in Atlantic 10 play this past weekend, but they do split the week series. We start off with a win on MLK Day against arch rivals George Washington. Palmer, going back to the 23-24 season, that is George Mason's fifth consecutive win over the Cross-Potomac rivals, the Revolutionaries. It's a big one for the Patriots. That stands right now as a Q2 win, even at home. So a big one for the Patriots in general. Palmer, let's talk about what this win means for the Patriots here and how that game kind of went.
It's a really good win when looking at getting a top 4 seed, because at the very least, you assume GW will be in the conversation for a top 4 team, of a bye. And I feel like if you have it, you at the very least means it's going to split with them. Hopefully they do more than split, but at the very least they'll split with them. And that would pretty much mean the tiebreaker would be if they beat St. Louis or not, or, because it goes off the top, the common opponent, which is like top of the rankings. So they're good. They at least beat VCU. They split VCUs. It's good for tiebreaker. And of course, it means a lot to win that game because Mason didn't look very good against Lower Chicago, and GW beat them by like 35. So it's like, man, this is a little scary. And then they couldn't do it.
Yeah, generally a take care of business game for the Patriots. Really kind of ran there by a big run there at the end of the first half there, Palmer. The Patriots went into the half up 8. It was nearly up 11. Just in front of a near half-court shot from Jahari Long rimmed in and out. That would have been a big one for the Patriots for sure. George Washington, as we know they could do, hit a couple of big threes, forced their way back in. But I think what I was most impressed from this game, Palmer, was the 2-point defense for the Patriots. I know George Washington maybe missed a couple of ones they don't normally miss, but sometimes that's what it takes to win a game. Usually a team that shoots well over 57% from 2 on the year. Mason held them to exactly 50% of their 2-point shots. They held them below their usual average from beyond the arc at 3 as well. That was the big difference maker, it felt like, for me in that game.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Jones went 1 for 5 from 2. He's kind of a pretty good driver. So anything below 50% is pretty impressive. I mean, and somebody pointed out, the guys didn't really score for. I mean, it was kind of just their big three, and that was it. Like, it was kind of Autry, Castro, and Johnson, and that was it. And Johnson scored like 11 or 13 in the first couple minutes, and then had a pretty pedestrian game after that. So,
yeah, certainly something that Mason had to change, I think, a little bit there, it looked like. Obviously, more of a focus on Garrett Johnson. He's back this year. This is very obviously, though, a very talented GW bunch. And what I'm about to say here, Palmer, should not take away from what this team is. They're a very good team. But it feels like to me, Palmer, this is almost a team that is schemed to perfection to beat last year's version of George Mason compared maybe to this year's version of George Mason. I mean, maybe do you agree with me on that idea point there? But I feel like this is a group that feels like it was meant to kind of be able to withstand that type of beating that George Mason of last year could give you defensively, and just be able to have the pure offensive talent to outscore them, while not necessarily being as key with the kind of athleticism the Mason now has from the 1 through 3 this year.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Kind of the, you're not going to score. We don't need a great defense because you're not going to score very much. But Mason can score this year, and it's just Mason. I mean, obviously Mason's offense was a little. You were very okay with it because of the amazing defense, but there were some slumps last year, and this year the slumps are much less common.
Yeah, absolutely. Big game for Marley Allenspach as usual, but I want to shout out Masai Troutman for 14 points, including 6 of 11 shooting, including 4 of 5 from 2. He had a couple of really big baskets by getting to the hoop, Palmer. This is the Masai Troutman, I think, the last couple of games that Mason Nation has really been waiting for. He's shown up in a big way over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, his finishing was, I think, I don't know if I mentioned it here, but he shot sub 50% from on layups the last couple of years, and it's the first year where he was at like 57% last time I checked. Now that's not amazing, but it's still like you're shooting sub 50, so will you absolutely take 57%? I mean 4 for 5. He went 4 for 5 in that game and against VCU. Those are good games to go 4 for 5 in, you know.
And you talk about in-conference improvements and in-season improvements we've seen from some of these guys. I think we have to talk about it again, Palmer. Fat Hill's shooting from the free throw line has changed dramatically from the turn of conference season. I mean, this was a guy who came in last year. He was a 65% free throw shooter at Ball State. As a guy who usually got to the basket, he has an excellent way to get. He does excellently at getting to the foul line, but he never really collected it all of them. Maybe didn't get as much as he should. He's currently shooting now 75% on the year. And Palmer, this is a crazy stat for me. He is shooting just a hair under 90%. He is 35 of 39 from the free throw line. It's been such a big deal. And I keep making this comparison. Maybe it's a little bit funny. It maybe is meant to be a little bit funny, but it's almost like watching Happy Gilmore learn how to putt in real life. This is a guy who had an incredible talent at getting to the basket, making shots, and getting fouled. He just maybe didn't have the last part, which was making those free throw shots. Now he's making free throws, Palmer, and it's making things that feel a lot more easier for George Mason.
Yeah, I mean, last year it was if he was making free throws at the same rate as last year, that'd be a vastly different player, because that's like 3 points a game. You're just losing. I mean,
he wouldn't be here. I think if you would put it, he wouldn't be here.
Yeah. I mean, he's actually shooting better than Mincy in conference play, which is pretty impressive considering Mincy was like a lot. He had only missed one for a long time, and he's fallen off a little bit. But I mean, still, you take mid-80s. But yeah, I mean, the free throws have been just really impressive, because that was kind of the. It felt like you could see teams just kind of fouling him, just like, okay, but he'll probably make one of two. We're okay with that, because he was gonna get 2 points. So now it's enough where it's like, okay, well, we can't really foul. We can't we can't soft intentionally foul him. Once he's fastest, now we kind of gotta play honest.
Yeah, certainly makes it a really interesting thing. I love Fat. I think he's been a great player this year. He's been such a great energy producer off the bench. I love him. He's been great. I also want to point out 18 assists for Mason in the game against GW, 5 from Long and 4 from Mincy, you expect. But also we had 3 from both Hill and Troutman. Some assists from the wings. By the way, Palmer, I think this is a fun stat to see, by the way. Emmanuel Conga has an assist in his last 3 games, including 2 against GW on the day. It's the passing and the ball movement from George Mason. I think the best we've seen so far under Tony Skinn.
Yeah, I mean, there are past teams where it would be like, dribble. Okay, it's my turn to dribble. I'm gonna drive. Okay, well, now it's your turn. But now it seems like there's a lot of intentional passing that is truly getting people open, getting people quality shots. I feel like Conga, in my mind, I can remember multiple assists that came off of offensive rebounds, which, if you're gonna, I mean, that's how you get assists. You get an offensive rebound, and somebody's probably open somewhere. And Conga's good enough processor that he can find the open man, which is really good for a freshman big man.
Yep. Absolutely. But Palmer, we do have to move on. We do have to talk about the game that we don't want to talk about, what we did talk about Saturday. As I said, George Mason falls for the first time in conference play to move to 18-2 on the season. They lose 74-65 to Rhode Island. It's their second straight season where they lose in Kingston. A tough one to swallow, Palmer, especially because George Mason seemed to have gotten control of the game at the end of the first half, but gave it away at the start of the second half, and Rhode Island never really looked back.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like in most road games, when your team kind of has has a bad game, usually it's offensively. Like usually you can't score at all. Like you miss a lot of threes or something. But this game, Mason's offense did pretty well. It was just they kind of couldn't really stop Tripp or Tyler Cochran, which is kind of odd because they kind of stopped him last game. That wasn't, you know what I mean? They kind of stopped him last game. I thought if Mason was going to lose, it was going to be Miles Corey going crazy. But I mean, it was something. I mean, somebody Archie pulled something out and it worked, and I have to respect that for him.
And you've talked about this in both of your preview articles against the two games played against Rhody this year. This is a Rhode Island team that does have an identity this year. It is hard-nosed defense. They're one of the best-rated defenses in the country. Now, a lot of that is through turnovers, which George Mason had less than 10 turnovers in both games this year. But it felt like Mason was off their game. The big one, of course, Riley Allensbach, only 6 points on the day, 1 for 6 for shooting. He really struggled with a very aggressive double team that Rhode Island, it felt like, consistently threw at him.
Yeah, all season Riley's been getting doubled, which makes sense. Double the center who's pretty strong in the post. And I feel like he's been like just barely getting the ball, bring it to himself so that they can't swipe at it. And it felt like this game, they were getting it to him. They were getting there half second early and were able to swipe at it. Because it says only has 2 turnovers. I guess some of them maybe he didn't really lose it, but it turned to like a wasted possession. It definitely messed him up a ton.
Yes.
I hope they can, fix that because I mean Conga and Ellington played a lot of minutes and they both played well, but Allensbach just couldn't handle the double team.
Do you think there's some criticism for Tony Skinn keeping Allensbach in there the last 4 minutes over an Ellington or Conga there in the post?
I get keeping the guy who, I mean, honestly, he took over he's taken over multiple games. I think Mason was down so much that it's like, let's just see, let's put it out with the guy who might just take over and be unstoppable.
Yeah, understood. But I think we also have to talk about the technical foul that Tony Skinn took. Look, I understand the frustration with the referee. It was a very slow second half. There were a lot of questionable calls, I thought, on both sides of the equation here in this game. It very much slowed the game down. It very much made the game a foul shooting contest. Multiple Mason fans did point out that it felt like it made it unable for Mason to get back into the game because it was either foul shots versus foul shots for a couple of minutes straight there. But Riley Allensbach gets called for a foul, but Mason only down 5. If the guy misses one, it's still a 2-possession game. However, Tony Skinn takes a technical foul. It's not very often that we talk about mistakes from this coaching staff there, Palmer. And maybe if it was a larger lead, I'd understand the frustration at maybe going after the referees there. But that seemed like a tactical error there from Tony Skinn that we don't usually see from him.
Yeah, you like to see the coach fighting for his guys, but you don't want it to, put away any chance of you winning the game. Because I think Mason then had the ball down 5, and it was like, oh man, if there wasn't a technical, they would have had it down 3.
They were down 7, I believe. They would have been down 7 or 8.
Okay.
They would have been down 8 because he missed one of the 2. The guy, not the guy who took the technical free throws, but the guy who took the actual free throws.
It was 5 before. Yes, it was 5 before the technical.
And then he took the 2, 7, and then they made 1 of 2 push to the 8. Again, that's where you play other, because if he misses just 1 of 2 and there's no technical, it's still at that point a 6-point game. You get a quick basket. There leads down the 4 there, and I understand the frustration. I did not think it was great reffing either. I did not think that was a particularly good call on Riley in that moment. But that kind of happens, and I think when it's a close game like that, frustration boils over. But like you said, really it was a takeover of Tyler Cochran and Jameer Tripp. Now, you don't expect Tyler Cochran to go 2 of 3 from 3. He made a tough one with Jahari Long right up in his grill. That happens sometimes. Jameer Tripp, we've talked about him before. He goes 6 for 11 from 2. You don't necessarily always expect that to happen, but he did it in this game. It happens. Mason's, I think, you talk about the interior defense sometimes of Allensbach, kind of struggled on both ends of the ball today. If he's not making it on offense, he's got to make it up on defense, and I don't think he made up for it on defense in this game. And I do think I want to point out, someone made this point to me who was a Rhode Island fan. Jonah Hinton hurt his ankle and he didn't play the last 10 minutes. And what kind of worked for Tony Skinn at the end of the home Rhode Island game is that they basically ball hogged the other four Rhode Island players and let Jonah Hinton take a bunch of shots. And it worked. And I think Tony Skinn was trying to go back to that, but then Hinton's ankle goes and he's not in there anymore. And I think there's a genuine question to ask. Did that help out Rhode Island? Because suddenly the guy who's their least efficient scorer couldn't shoot the ball anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that they have a really good offensive game and Hinton takes like the fourth most shots on the team. I really don't think that's a coincidence instead of the first most. Because it's kind of one of the things like, Archie, it's pretty deep into the season. I feel like some options need to be changed around. So unfortunately, Mason might have been the, kind of the test where like, oh wait, this works, which is crazy that it took like what 20 games.
Yeah,
20 games to figure it out, but at least it wasn't. At least they're trying. At least it was something weird. Cochran's just huge.
Yeah, we know about Cochran. Such a good player. He really is.
He's bigger than their center. So it's like you can understand how it's going to be a matchup nightmare on the wrong night.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But sometimes such is life. Mason loses this game. I do want to point out, good performance I thought from Corey Mincy. I think he was really the one guy in that starting lineup who I thought showed up on the offensive side of the ball. You mentioned it already, too. Good games from Conga and Ellington off the bench. Nick Ellington's first game back, he missed the last two due to concussion symptoms. Palmer. Clearly, though, I felt like that Loyola Chicago game in particular, it would have been nice to have him, but good to have him back, and I thought he had a good performance in his first game back.
Yeah, it was a very good. You'll take that for first game back after a little bit being out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But now, Palmer, we have to, as we always do, we have to move on. Mason, they hit the road. They do not hit the road. They come back to Fairfax. Luckily, it looks like the guys got home safe before the snow came in and mucked up most of the D.C. area. But Mason, hopefully, we haven't heard anything yet, but I believe the expectation is that Davidson will be able to make it to Fairfax for Wednesday's game. They take it on the Davidson Wildcats, a 4-3 record in conference play. Some questionable wins there in their regards, but they are 3-0 away though from Davidson, North Carolina. So it's a team that's had success so far on the road in conference play. You can't overlook that, Palmer. They just played VCU very tough, but is this a matchup though that you think maybe George Mason could take advantage of?
Yeah, I think they won't have the. Sean Logan is a good perimeter or a good interior defender, but once Sean Logan is out of the game, and he's not been playing much lately, like 20 minutes a game at tops. Once he's out of the game, I really don't trust Ian Plateau to really be able to. He's a freshman, I don't trust Plateau to be able to really stop Mason. I think it could be a game where Mason just kind of out physicals them. 3-point defense will of course be important because it's Davidson. Robert Blooms has been really, really good, and honestly, I would treat him like Terrence Hill because he's just such a good. He doesn't have the name of Terrence Hill. His team isn't as good, but it's similar caliber.
Yeah, Parker Friedrichsen as well, the transfer from Wake Forest, shooting over 40% in both conference and throughout the season so far, Palmer. He is really a guy you're going to have to watch for here. Sam Brown, also a volume scorer. And then, outside of those, though, it's been maybe an inconsistency. Josh Scovins, a good slashing forward type of guy. You talked about Plateau. Interesting player, Sean Logan. Good defensive player, has had his struggles offensively. Hunter Adam has been good in limited minutes, though, this year. A strong offensive player, but he's been limited because of his defensive play. It's an interesting group here for sure. It's a group that maybe is a little bit smaller than what we've been used to. We've seen Davidson run some really big front courts in recent years, Palmer. Not so much the case this year. Their usual starters usually consist of Sam Brown, Parker Friedrichsen, 6'6" Devin Brown, and then 6'6" Josh Scovins at the 4. So potentially, we've talked about this a little bit so far this year, Palmer. The 4 spot for Mason, with the issues around Dole Adebayo, his struggles this year. Mason has been lacking size at the 4 a little bit this year. This seems like a game where that won't hurt them as much.
Yeah, I think Presley or Troutman at the 4 won't really be a problem because Hunter Adams is kind of big, but not like a problem big.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is an interesting team, though. It's a young team for sure. I believe there's only one senior who mainly gets minutes on the team. That's Sean Logan. Joe Hurlbert has not seen any minutes. Their other senior has not seen any minutes yet here in conference play. So it's a young team, Palmer. It's an interesting team to watch. But again, we talk about teams that Tony Skinn has generally coached well against. Davidson is one of those teams, Palmer. He's been able to, it's been close sometimes, but he's been able to get out of those games, though, with victories for the Patriots.
Yeah, it feels like Davidson is always really good at beating teams that aren't too well coached. Uh, Feels like undisciplined teams just kind of lose because it's like the guy doesn't follow his man off ball too tightly, and all of a sudden, oh no, there's a wide open 3, there's a wide open cut to the basket.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there are 2 game stretch of beating GW like in the Smith Center, but then beforehand losing to Rhode Island, scoring 45 points against Rhode Island. You just don't know who's showing up.
Yeah, certainly. And you look at some of these wins, it was a tight one against Fordham. It was a tight one against St. Joe's, St. Joe's who looked improved, but it's been a tight one there. The only team they've really put away that they've beaten is Loyola Chicago, which that a lot of teams have been able to do that. I know Mason necessarily wasn't able to do that, but that was after a crazy hot first half from Loyola Chicago as well. They have not been able to repeat against basically everyone else in the conference so far this year. But this is a really interesting group. They have a lot of guys. They go deep. I mean, you look at their play here against VCU. They put 11 different guys out there, Palmer. That's a lot of potential combinations for Matt McKillop to use. The most change, though, that we've seen, we've talked about this, the most change that we've seen has actually been at the point guard. It's been switched through 4 guys. Freshman Nick Koval, Sam Brown, who we talked about, Devin Brown, another freshman, and Robert Bloom's playing a couple minutes at the point guard as well. But they've been switching through 11 guys. Neither of us are coaches, Paul, but I have to imagine that makes it hard to necessarily scout out this team a little bit.
Yeah, because you could see a lineup in like the 4th minute of the game and realistically not see that lineup for the rest of the game. I mean, there's 11 guys, and if you look at the 11 guys, these are all real players. Like these are all guys like, yeah, he should be playing in the A10. That guy needs minutes. So just kind of I think a big thing will be if somebody fouls out, might just not really matter because the guy behind him is not that much worse. They're so deep, and some teams like to say we can go 11 deep, we can go 10, we can go 11. Davidson actually can because they just have so many like fine wings, fine guards. They can do it.
Yeah, it's the interesting question with Davidson, right? There's a lot of solid players. I don't know if they have a great player on this team, though. I think that's kind of been their struggle. It's kind of the opposite of their struggles. They've had some really good players the last 2 years under Matt McKillop, but maybe not necessarily the depth. It seems like the depth might kind of be there this year for the Wildcats, but I don't know if they have that one really great player who's certainly a first team or maybe even a second team All A10 player.
Yeah, I'm thinking they were hoping that's what Sam Brown could be. Kind of a similar background to Corey Mincy, where he was a point guard on a pretty bad team, and Mincy is the one that worked out, and Sam Brown is kind of what usually happens with point guards on really bad teams. It's like, oh, maybe that's why they were that bad. So I think Blooms with an increased role could be that. I think they have a lot of guys who are almost that, but as you said, nobody puts them over the top.
Yeah, certainly interesting. It's going to be a very, very tough game for this team. I'm really interested to see kind of what happens here. You look at their conference play, it's middle of the pack in both. They're 8th in offense, in efficiency on Ken Palm in regards to offense. They're 7th on defense. This is an interesting team. They've really struggled inside the arc so far, particularly on defense, but they block a lot of shots. I'm sure part of that goes to Plateo, who, like you mentioned, is 7 foot tall. But this is a strong Davidson team. I'm interested to see how Wednesday goes. But you always, I think, Palmer, and we've said it again, under Tony's skin, you always take the Patriots at home. It's just what happens. We know what it does. But moving on, next Saturday, Mason makes the trip up to upstate New York to play the St. Bonaventure Bonnies. They've been struggling. And Palmer, we've got a special guest here. I want you to introduce our special guest here. He's just popped up on the screen now. If you want to introduce him, Palmer, go right ahead. Mr. SBUnfurled, welcome to the Onward to Victory podcast. If you're there. Yeah, there he is.
Hey, guys. Appreciate you having me.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much for coming on, sir. Now, obviously, this has not been the season I think St. Bonaventure fans were hoping for. There's been a lot of off-season talk around this team the last couple of years. Adrian Wojnarowski, the famous NBA reporter, now retired, is kind of leading the way as the team's GM. Mark Schmidt is one of the most respected coaches in the Atlantic 10, but this is a year where it seemed after starting 11-2 in the non-conference play, it feels like a year where the wheels have kind of come off a little bit.
Yeah, this is a low point, I think, of the entire Schmidt era. We started off 10-1, came out of Colgate, didn't really play very well in that game, but we were 10-1. Last year we started 14-1, and once we started A10 play, just kind of hit a wall. Ended up, I think, 500 at 9-9. This year, again, going into conference play, looked pretty good. I think we were 12-1, and it's been 1-6 since then. I mean, the last 9 games, just 2-7. There's several reasons for that we can get into, but I think overall this is certainly as down as I have been as a Bona fan since Schmidt was hired.
Palmer, I'm going to want to pass this to you here. You're kind of our stats guy. I want you to kind of talk about this here. What's going? Yeah, I want you to talk with both you and Unfurled here. Just talk about what's been going on with Bona on both sides of the ball, but especially defensively, it seems like where this team struggles are. Palmer, I'm going to want to start with you on that.
Yeah, the defense has been really, really bad. Like, opponents are just kind of getting whatever they want. They're last in 3-point percentage and second to last in 2-point percentage. That's just really, that's not going to work. You can't be a basketball team that opponents get whatever they want from 2 and 3. You gotta do one right, and they just haven't. I feel like the game against St. Louis, like obviously St. Louis isn't going to shoot a gazillion % from 3 but that wasn't all on St. Louis. That was a decent bit on guys just kind of getting open for 3, where it's like, this guy's made 6 threes and he's getting a 7th and 8th open one too. I think this team just kind of not playing up to what they could. Frank Mitchell having to be the number 1 option probably wasn't really supposed to happen, because he was kind of, in my mind, he was considered kind of a solid piece that's going to be good, and him having to be the number 1 option is just probably a little too much for him to handle, being able to play both sides.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to you on this here, Unfurled. What is like Palmer said, is Mitchell being number 1 option putting too much on him? Is it, DeSante Bowen not really working out so far this year? Is it, Daryl Simmons kind of, what's going on there? What's with that? Caden Charles, he's not really worked out that much. Drew Grahovic, he's been inconsistent. Is it Schmidt not playing, going back to only playing 6 guys a night again? It feels like what's the main reason that you think it's going on for St. Bonaventure struggle?
With Frank Mitchell, I think maybe he shouldn't be the primary option. I think he has done very well in that role, at least compared to our last few bigs who we have played through. But that is how Schmidt's offense is run. That's how he is always, going back 10, 15 years, the offense runs through the big man. If you can't pass out of the post, you're going to struggle. And I think Mitchell has done an okay job with that. But, this offseason, this is the first full roster that Woj has built as GM. And one of the goals that the staff has was to rely a little bit less on the big, athletic, raw wing types that we got, the good defensive guys. You know, your last year was Melvin Council and Chance Moore and guys like that, and kind of shift into a bit of a more modern style skill guys who might not be as good on defense, but they're going to make up for it offensively. The problem is that I think we did an okay job of that, and I think we have pretty good skill guys on the team. And this is the best shooting percentage the Bonnies have had from deep among the probably the top 2 or 3 percentage wise that we've had shooting from deep. The problem is we might have those more modern style basketball players, but the system is not adapting to those guys. Schmidt is still playing the old archaic, dump it down to the low post, get a lot of mid-range shots when the roster isn't really built that way. So I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect with how the roster was built versus how the team is actually playing. We are, I think, 322nd nationally in three-pointers attempted per field goal attempt. So we're hardly taking any threes compared to a lot of the other teams in the A10. And that's one of our biggest strengths is our 3-point percentage. But I would like to see us shoot a lot more threes and see, you know, how many threes can we take before that average starts to fall back down. You know, and I would say, you mentioned a lot of guys. Bowen, he had a bad injury last year, was out for the season. All I heard all offseason was, oh, he has improved his shot a lot. Well, that hasn't really panned out. He is 8 of 29 from 3, only shooting 28%. That allows defenses to really sag off of him. And if you know anything about Schmidt, he's going to play that captain point guard 40 minutes a game. So that's 40 minutes a game where a defense can just kind of sag back off and really, you know, pack the post a little bit more. There are a lot of other issues, though, besides those two. You mentioned Caden Charles. I think he is one of the guys that has worked out, actually. He was a bright spot. You didn't hear much about him at all in the offseason. He's really been one of our better players. That I would say the biggest disappointment by far is Joe Grahovic. We didn't really know how he would adapt to the D1 level because he hardly has any basketball experience. But from all accounts, like, this was a guy who had NBA potential and he would really hit his stride once A10 play hits, and that has just not happened. He has been pretty much a total non-factor, not aggressive when he gets the ball. It seems like every time he has the ball, he's playing afraid to make a mistake. He wants to get rid of it as fast as he can. I think his usage rate is bottom 5 in the A10. So I said in the offseason, if this team is going to hit their ceiling, they need Grahovic to be a legit A10 player, and he just hasn't been. Then, you know, there's a lot of other things I could get into detail-wise with the defense and other players, but I'm not sure how much more time you want to spend on that. But those are the main things. I think Buddy Simmons has been pretty good, especially offensively with A10 play. But those two guards, Bowen and Simmons, on the perimeter, a little bit undersized, not the best defenders. It's really, and you saw it against St. Louis for sure, but other teams as well, even Fordham and LaSalle, they can't seem to keep a guy in front of them. Other teams are having an easy time with their guards blowing by those guards and getting into the lane and kicking it out. And it seems like this defense is chasing the ball around the perimeter, even more than they have in the past when they've doubled the post a lot. So, you know, there's a lot going wrong with this team, a lot of disconnect. It does seem like they try hard most games, but you know, the defense is definitely the worst that Schmidt has had here.
Oh, I don't know if you've watched any of George Mason at all this year, or if you've looked at them at all. If you have, is there anything that you're most concerned about that Mason can do, that you're concerned that St. Bonaventure, that your Bonnies won't be able to stop?
Yeah, man. Here's the thing, like with this game against George Mason, all these games are very one-offs. If this was a game down in Fairfax, I think George Mason would win by 15-20. If this was a game in the Riley Center on a random Wednesday night, I think Mason would still probably win. They're a better team right now, for sure, by far. The thing is, Saturday it's 80s weekend, basically an alumni weekend. It's going to be the best crowd of the year. I'm hoping that that gives our team a pretty big boost. I think the environment that's going to be in the Riley Center can play a big role. The Bona team has some guys who are pretty skilled. It's not like this team can't have an upset, especially on a day like Saturday when there's going to be a great crowd. But Mason, it's not the best matchup for Bonas, I don't think. They do tend to slow it down a little bit, which may be good for Bonas, but Bonas defensively, I've watched Mason a little bit here and there. And I saw a little bit of the Rhode Island game when they dropped that one, but man, I'm not sure about specifics, but if you can have guards like I think Mason does that can get into the paint pretty easily. Corey Mincy has been one of the best players in the A10. I think he's going to be able to do a lot of damage. And then Alan Spatch down low has also been really good. So basically, rebounding for Bonas has been pretty bad. I know the stats, especially offensively, look good, but that's a lot of just Frank Mitchell being absolute tank down low. We haven't had a good rebounding four-man, which we have had in the past. In the past, we've had good wings and guards that could get up and get rebounds. Other than Caden Charles and Frank Mitchell, this is a bad rebounding team. So I think Mason with Alan Spatch down low and a couple of their guards that they have some of those athletic wings. If you can neutralize Mitchell and Charles on the glass, like they should dominate the boards.
All right. Well, Unfurled, we appreciate you coming on today. We appreciate it. Good luck on Saturday. And once again, thank you very much, sir.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good luck this year.
Thank you very
Good
much.
as well.
Appreciate it, sir. All right, Palmer, for now, that will be it for us today from the Onward to Victory podcast. I again want to thank SBU Unfurled for making an appearance today. We very much appreciate that for him there. But for now, we're going to log off. We will see you guys this time next week to talk about the next set of games for the Patriots. It's a Pennsylvania home and home for Mason. Next, we have games against Duquesne and St. Joe's at home to look forward to. But for now, we've got to get through these two. We'll see you next week. This has been the Onward to Victory podcast. I'm Joe Szymanski. He's Palmer Johnson. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.